What is up, everybody? Back again for another episode of the Fan Section and ROQCS podcast. I'm Alan. That is Tyson. We are your hosts. This is going to continue off the part one episode of episode 50, which is talking about all the traditions, all the players, our top 50 favorite things, basically, of college sports. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you guys so much for the comments. Thank you so much for the podcast reviews as well. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I'm just going to dive right into it in the first player, which isn't really a player at all. It's actually going to be a tradition called Paternoville in Penn State. Yeah, so this tradition started when Penn State got to, it was a first come, first served basis for I think it was the Penn State Ohio State game. And ever since then, kids have been camping out, and they've camped out for the entire, since Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night. They got their tickets to, Friday night. But it's called Paternoville. It's just a campsite.
On campus,
in front of the in front of the stadium, where the ticket sales are starting. So I still think it's kind of funny that they still do this. Even though kids now can get season tickets, if they choose to, a part of their tuition costs or whatever.
Well, that's a tradition.
It's a tradition they just carried on.
And so basically it's like a 3-day tailgate.
Yeah, which, you know what? Do your thing.
Yeah.
What do you got, man?
Awesome tradition. Okay, how about still to this, in the modern college football era, the only primarily defensive player to ever win the Heisman Trophy, and that was in 1997, Charles Woodson, defensive back for Michigan. Now, a lot of people hear that and they go, oh, he was primarily defense. Well, I mean, as we both well know, he was returning kickoffs for touchdowns, punts for touchdowns. He also, at a point in his junior year, he was playing somewhere between 5 and 10 plays on the offense each game. He was just a stellar, fantastic player. And then obviously, like I said, won the 1997 Heisman Trophy. That same year, the last time Michigan won the national championship.
Woodson did it all. Literally, he was Mr. Everything, and he rightfully deserved the Heisman. He was mainly a defensive player, obviously, yes, that's what he was known for, but he was actually known for, I think, as a specialist. He'd be a specialist in today's game. He really would be.
Hold on, a lot of people forget, though. You remember who he beat for the Heisman that year?
No.
Tennessee.
Peyton Manning?
Manning was second in the voting that year.
Can you imagine that? Good God. Well, both totally top players in their era, for sure. And Woodson went on to play, just as long as Peyton Manning.
Oh, both Hall of Fame careers, for sure.
20 years.
They're both those guys, college football and pro football Hall of Fame, no question about it.
Oh, yeah. This one is actually a fun one for West Virginia fans. Take Me Home, Country Roads. So, it's a classic one. The signature John Denver made this song I don't think he was a West Virginia fan, the college fan at all. I just think he just was a catchy tune. He started singing it. After its release in 1971, West Virginia obviously adopted it as its their main song. So, Take Me Home, Country Roads, West Virginia. It's got it's key.
Basketball, football after every game, right? It's as everyone's leaving.
Every bar. It's just a great song, and it fits West Virginia perfectly.
Well, let me tee you up with a tradition here that I love, but I'm not a part of really, and that's the world's biggest cocktail party, the Florida Georgia. Isn't that typically in Jacksonville?
It is in Jacksonville. Yeah, it's in Jacksonville, Florida. It's played. Actually, I think in 2 years they couldn't reach an agreement with the stadium, so there will be a home and home.
They quit, but the Jaguars. What a terrible organization that is.
With them for whatever reason. So, but it's up in the air. That 2 years from now, they'll do a home and home, which will be still insane. Can you imagine? Oh, jeez. It's basically like a home game for Florida anyway. You know what I mean? But Georgia faithful does travel really well.
And between the hedges at Georgia is an awesome tradition.
That's a tradition in itself.
Florida being the swamp.
The swamp and the gator chomp.
Yeah.
And then Todd Gurley doing the chomp stomp. That was, so that right there, the rivalry between the two schools is one of the greatest rivalries, I think, in college football, next to Ohio State, Michigan, next to CSU, Wyoming.
I just can't believe, and this is a side note from this show, but how Jacksonville is just so poorly managed. They can't do anything right. I just don't get it.
Hey, look, I'm not trying to be biased, but I think they did right with their first overall pick this year. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, Trevor Lawrence, we'll see what, but
you're right. Yeah, the town itself, sports-wise, doesn't make any sense. But I will give you this one. We'll go to a live mascot here. Bevo, the Longhorn. from Texas. I think it's one of the coolest. And actually, those of you that don't, that aren't Georgia fans and might be Texas fans, understand that the Bevo charged Uga in that same. But because of that, the Texas won the bowl game, which is cool. And then you have the traditional "we're back," and then the next year they only won like 7 games, so that's fine. The point is that Bevo, I think, is still one of the coolest live mascots ever because it's just really cool to see a gigantic horned animal. Personally. But yeah, and the mascot started out in 1916. It was purchased by alumni, and it was given to the school after that.
Outside of Bevo, the longest standing tradition at Texas is we're back, and then by week 5 they're 4-3. Yeah. That's the longest standing tradition in Austin.
Or Matthew McConaughey standing on the sidelines teaching, which is really cool too.
It bugs me personally, and maybe I have no foot to stand on because Colorado's terrible at football right now. But they always say, well, Bevo's bigger than Ralphie. No. Well, this current Ralphie. I guess the newest Ralphie is a lot smaller. You saw that last year. But the previous Ralphie 4, was almost 2,000 pounds. Bevo's not that big.
No. And people are like, why do they I think live mascots they need to stay in the game.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But you can't take them away. I mean, you have one that I'll bring up a little later on. You know what I mean? Like I've actually got like 4 or 5 that I'll bring up.
Well, and it's a common misconception. These animals get treated better than any animals in the world.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they have a huge pasture out there for Ralphie, and they literally pull him out of the pasture 1 day a week. Yeah. Other than that, she has free reign out there. All the food, anything she could possibly want. And so, anyways, I think that's kind of a fake argument. I agree with you. I think the live animal mascots are awesome.
I think it's just a part of sport.
I think I know some of the ones you're going to mention, especially in the SEC. They do a great job at this.
They do, and one of them is obviously the War Eagle. I think that the fact that I'm not a fan of Auburn at all as a Georgia fan, but I really do love this tradition. That nothing gets you. And there's been a couple times where I've watched Auburn because they played before Georgia, but you see the eagle fly through the stadium and then land on the 50-yard line. I think that is one of the coolest things.
Yes.
The most iconic.
No
things.
question.
Especially as like an American, you know what I mean? Like,
the
eagle represents so many different things to different people, and the War Eagle. Why are you tigers? Why not just change it? It doesn't make sense to me. Why you don't have a tiger? Like, just be the Auburn Eagles or Auburn War Eagles.
And Tiger's like the most common team name in college sports.
Yeah, but at the same time, your mascot is not. I mean, it's seen as a tiger, but your mascot is really the War Eagle.
I think, and maybe you guys can let us know in the comments when you if you know. But my guess would be they were the Tigers before this tradition began.
Oh yeah, they were for sure.
And then I think they probably should change it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's never a bad thing. I mean, like Stanford, they should change their mascot to a tree. They really should, because they have nothing to do with the cardinal.
Well, it's supposedly it's the color cardinal. It's not the bird cardinal, but their mascot's a tree, and it's like a nasty,
the story behind it?
Rabid tree with
the story behind it is actually the band needed a mascot, and they voted on it being a tree to stand out. And it was between that and the sandwiches. And the band came up with the tree is actually the band's mascot, and the band voted between sandwiches and trees, and the tree won. And yeah, so the tree has been there ever since.
Speaking of Stanford, though, how about the tradition of the Stanford band? And maybe it's called one of the greatest games of all time, but that Cal Stanford game with that last minute, they had the kick and squib kickoff, and they pitched it 4 and 5 times. Cal did, right? And Stanford thought they won the game. And you can hear the announcer saying, "The band is on the field!" And this Cal player is navigating, and then right as he gets the end zone, he jumps up, and he just stone cold Steve Austin's this like trumpet player in the end zone. Oh my gosh, what an incredible story that is.
I love it. So I love the bands. And the cool thing about, for those of you that don't know, the band only has one job, and that's to support the football team.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. They travel with them. They have competitions throughout the year, but they're they travel and they have a way, and we even saw A&M. They had they had the cheerleaders, but they had the cheer. They're called cheer something. Mm-hmm. I think they're called the cheer captains, and they're a bunch of dudes, and they're literally they're with the band, and their job is to hype up the crowd. Yeah. So I just think it's one of the coolest traditions too. Is every band has its own name. UGA has the red coats. You know what I mean? So they just the ability that they get a chance to, you correlate football with the band, and every touchdown they play their song,
Uh-huh.
and it's nothing hypes you up more as an opposing player away hearing your song in their stadium.
And no place is the band on more display than at the HBCUs. Grambling, Southern. They actually will have, fans
They'll
will
have drumline competitions like in the middle of the field.
Oh yeah.
Halftime is game time for a lot of them.
Yeah. I think, by the way, with Deion Sanders, with some of these coaches, I'm telling you, I think HBCUs are on the rise now. I think you might. So James Madison is now joining Division I FBS football this year.
What conference?
They might be independent.
Oh, okay.
Sunbelt, maybe, I can't remember exactly. But and they're storied program. We've won 5 national titles.
Wofford is a storied program too.
But I wouldn't be surprised if you see some of these HBCUs starting to get into FBS.
You know what? That'd be awesome. They honestly, I think Grambling State should be a part of it personally.
That's a massive rivalry, Southern and Grambling, by the way, going all the way back. Eddie Robinson, one of the greatest college football coaches of all time, the longtime Grambling head coach. Yeah. Let me bounce back, though, to a stud standout player who left us far too soon, and that's Rashawn Salam, passed a few years back. All-time greatest running back in Colorado history, in my view, and probably most people's view, from 1992 to 94. In 94, he had 2,055 yards, which was, at the time, the 5th most in a single season all time. Had 24 touchdowns. The Buffaloes finished 3rd in the country that year, and Salam brought home the Heisman. I mean, one of the greatest, and obviously I'm biased.
Buffalo, I think, football.
Possibly. There's a handful of Dick Anderson. No, I don't think Cordell Stewart's in the conversation.
On that list, no.
Dick Anderson, some of the older in the modern era, Rashawn Salam for sure. Okay. But then you also got like tight ends, Daniel Graham.
Yeah.
So I mean,
I'm saying like the great. I mean, he won a Heisman. Like that's the peak.
Eric Bieniemy finished 3rd in Heisman voting.
He's solid too. But I think when you think of even Chris Brown.
Nobody has backhand slapped Nebraska harder ever than Chris Brown did. When Nebraska came to Colorado, I think it was 2001. Yeah. They're number 1 in the country. Colorado was like 7, and I mean, it was the vaunted black shirt defense. Their quarterback, Eric Crouch, won the Heisman Trophy that year, and they come into Boulder. They think they're going to roll us. They're on their way to a national championship matchup with Miami, and boy, Chris Brown drops 6 rushing touchdowns on him. Colorado beats Nebraska 62-36. Goes on to avenge their loss in the Big 12 championship against against Chris Sims and Texas. Yeah. And then we get to Fiesta Bowl. The 3rd best team by record-wise in the Big 12, Nebraska, goes to the Rose Bowl and just gets mollywopped by Miami. Just gets mollywopped.
I remember 2001. Because I went to school with one of the sons of, well, actually there was 2 sons, but Coach Watson, the offensive coordinator at the time, and they were talking about I was just like, because I was like, oh, this is cool, your team is awesome, tell me about it. You know what I mean? They're like, Chris Brown's the man, and I was like, okay, cool. So it was a lot of fun.
I mean, that team, you had Daniel Graham. You had two linemen who went in the first round of the NFL draft, Andre Gerard and Victor Rogers. Chris Brown, obviously. Matt McChesney, Bobby Purify. I might be misremembering time frames here, but I think maybe Tedrick Thompson.
Was Joel Klatt on that team?
No. Joel Klatt was after. Okay. He might have been a freshman. Actually, that might be. The starting quarterback was Bobby Pesavento. Yeah. It was Craig Oaks, excuse me, at the start of the year. And then he had some injuries, but also was terrible. And so then Bobby Pesavento comes in. Yeah. So kind of under the radar, kind of like with Stetson Bennett and JT Daniels, where everyone thought it would be JT Daniels, Stetson Bennett. Wasn't Bennett a walk-on?
Bennett is a walk-on.
Unbelievable.
Well, not anymore, but it's a walk-on.
Unbelievable.
It was, it's cool. I mean, it just goes to show you don't have to be a 5-star player to dominate. You know what I mean? The rabbit hole that we were basically saying is, there's still a lot of tradition in a lot of some of these other schools that you wouldn't think of. And speaking of tradition, this one is actually, I've experienced it personally on firsthand because LSU's famous Tiger food, Mike the Tiger. So LSU has, let's go back to live mascots. They have a live tiger in a cage, and they actually put the tiger in front of the away locker room. So, and they put him there on purpose because it's scary to see a tiger just walking back and forth, and they don't feed him before you get there. They don't feed him.
They want him to be ravenous.
So he's hungry. And he's staring when he walks by, and I've experienced this. It's actually really scary.
Yeah,
like,
I'm bad.
It's a tiger. You know what I mean?
Tigers are big.
This guy's he's huge. So and the fans line up and they're shouting tiger food as you walk into the they know the time you're gonna get there. They line up and they shout tiger food. I think it's one of the coolest traditions, but also one of the scariest traditions ever. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But yeah, he's caged. He can't get out. I promise. But
and also, I mean, look into it. I'm sure he's very well taken care of.
Oh yeah. I mean, he gets steaks every day.
Yeah. Let me digress into another sport here. How about women's swimming? One of the greatest to ever do it, Natalie Coughlin. I know you followed her Olympic career closely, but at Cal, 61-0 record in dual meets, 12 NCAA titles. One of the greatest to ever do it.
Dominant, absolutely. I think Olympians get overlooked because a lot of them don't go to college. I mean, you had the Jeremy Bloom scandal, right? Like Jeremy Bloom was one of those athletes that unfortunately was told because he was an Olympic athlete, he was technically pro in a sport, he couldn't compete in the NCAA anymore. So like a lot of Olympic athletes didn't go to college. Now we're starting to see that kind of turn. Coughlin was one of them that at Cal she's an Olympian athlete. Yeah. She's Olympian. She's going to dominate regardless. Yeah. But still, it's. I think you can't take away that part of somebody's life. Like
especially if it's not the same sport.
Exactly. It's not your fault that you're really good at 18.
This is just continuing in a long tradition. Maybe the most storied tradition is the NCAA just completely blowing all of these situations. Yeah. NCAA is terrible. It's a cartel, in my opinion, but that's just me.
They haven't handled the NIL situation all very well either.
Oh, I mean, from the death penalty at SMU, which was a way overreaction.
Oh, yeah.
And then they pulled back, and then they're trying to get, Maurice Claret sold his jersey to somebody for $70. Mm-hmm. Let's disqualify. It's like, come on.
Or let's take the Heisman for Reggie Bush, even though his stats say he was the greatest player of that season. So I
mean, we could do a whole episode about all the things the NCAA is.
Yeah, we'll call it the bashing NCAA.
Yeah.
But another fun tradition though that actually I think is actually going to be, I'm a little mixed on this one. I don't know if it's still allowed. I think it is. I think they still do it at home games, but in 2010 they had a 1-year agreement saying that they couldn't have them in the stadium anymore. Mississippi State cowbells. They're synonymous. That's what you think of. So in 1940s, a cow warned them in the field during the game at Ole Miss, and they ended up Mississippi State ended up winning that game. So to honor that, ever since they've had cowbells, and if you've heard a cowbell, one is fine. 40,000 is just utterly impossible. It's like
obnoxious.
The boogaloo.
Yeah.
From
the vuvuzela. Yeah.
From
World Cup.
It's like that. It's just and it sounds like 1,000 flies flying around. The bell doesn't sound like flies, but it's just you can't pinpoint the sound. It's just horrible. But nothing as a Mississippi State fan hypes you up more than a bunch of cowbells, right?
I bet.
So, but here and then it says in 2010 there was a 1-year agreement that allowed fans to bring their bells from back in. So I don't know if that's still a tradition. Started it back in 2010, but because every now and again you see when Mississippi State gets a chance to host what is it, ESPN's Kirk Herbstreit.
Game day.
There's people with cowbells behind them. So I still think it's one of the coolest traditions, like sound wise. I think it's awesome, but it drowns out the band, which is even cool.
That's like every decade, 50 years the SEC guy. But it seems like every decade or 15 years or whatever, Ole Miss and Mississippi State are pretty good at the same time.
Yeah.
And then they kind of both disappear for a while. But
this year I think they're going to be really good.
But you think Mississippi State's going to be better?
I think Mississippi's going to be back. Not like I think they're going to be an 8-win team.
Well, they return a ton of talent, and they're actually a lot of people see Mike Leach and they think, they think Texas Tech, Washington State, they're going to throw the ball all over. But kind of surprising, they actually have a pretty good defense.
That's what I'm saying. I think they're going to be pretty. I think they're going to be a lot better.
And Ole Miss gets Jackson Dart in there to 5-star recruit to replace Matt Corral.
Yeah,
I think they might be a little bit better.
Exciting game. We'll put it that way. Like the rivalry might be officially close, which is good. What do you got?
Yeah, how about college hockey? I just did that episode a couple weeks ago with my brother Brad. College hockey, yeah. But how about Chris Drury? Boston University, he played there for 3 years before being drafted into the NHL. 3-time Defensive Player of the Year in the entire country. led Boston to the national championship. I believe it was 1995. Hats off to Chris Drury. Obviously went on to be a phenomenal NHL player.
Isn't he a Red Wing? Did he play for the Red Wings?
I believe he played for the Red Wings, yeah.
Nope, can't ever like Red Wings.
He was on those teams with like Yzerman and like all those guys.
Yeah, Yzerman, Osgood. You had
what was that goalie's name?
Osgood.
Was it Osgood?
Chris Osgood. Him and Patrick Waugh fought at center ice. That's why.
Yeah.
Nope, not a fan. But to piggyback off this, I will say that I think one of the coolest. It's not a tradition. It is a story in USA Olympic hockey. 1980 was all college kids. Miracle on Ice. They beat the Czech Republic. Mike Rizione with his famous goal, running around the ice, going that. But that's all college kids. UMD Bulldogs, Maryland, Boston College. The coach had just got done coaching and winning an actual title. You know what I mean?
And for the first time in probably, I don't know, 30 years maybe, right? This last Olympics, Winter Olympics, all college players again.
Which I thought
because the NHL would refuse to let them play.
And they did really well. Like, they actually competed. People were like, they're not going to. It was kind of like a repeat almost. I mean, had they won the gold medal, I think there would have been a movie on it.
So I didn't realize this until I was doing that episode a week and a half ago or whatever. But imagine this.
Byers was on that team.
Imagine this, okay? You start your college season. You play 10 games, whatever. Then you leave your college team. They keep playing, but you leave, go play in the Olympics in the middle of the season. Then you come back for the end of the season.
That's nuts.
Crazy, right?
That's crazy. But that's awesome. That's what a lot of the pros do. I mean, and I think honestly, like, I think once you make it to the pro level, I think you should have a 2-year minimum. Like, you can't compete within your first 2 years. Like, if it's your rookie and sophomore year, you can go and play in the Olympics, but after that, you can't. I think just to keep it that age. So there's always an 18 to 25-year-old gap.
Well, hockey's weird too, with scheduling wise, because like I remember 2 years ago, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. Kale, well, but this was 2019, so before COVID or whatever. But the college season, first of all, the draft is 3/4 of the way through the college season, the NHL draft. Then they have the Frozen Four, and then Cale Makar went from the Frozen Four. Like a week later, he was starting for the Avalanche in the playoff game.
Yeah, he scored a goal.
I know.
That's when he knew he was going to be a unicorn.
That is weird, isn't it?
Byers did the same thing.
Yeah,
from the Pios.
How about? And I want to spin this off into a question for you. But how about one of Arizona's greatest chosen daughters, Jenny Finch, played at Arizona Wildcats. Obviously, one of the greatest women's softball pitchers of all time in college, and then obviously went on to have a very storied Olympic career.
Oh, very, very. So you could argue that she was a part of the USA team that got softball eliminated from the Olympics.
Oh, for sure.
Because USA had like this streak of like, it was like 300 games that they hadn't lost, and it was just like USA, and that was it. It was like USA, oh well, we're gonna lose by 15 today. You know, like they were mercy ruling countries.
Yeah, but
no, I don't feel bad for them at all. Like,
I know, but then they removed. This is my question to you: is they've removed softball from the Olympics? It's now been a couple, I think, 2 or maybe 3, 2 Olympics, Summer Olympics since then. They should bring it back, right?
100%.
Yeah,
because you grow up and so this is what I'm not trying to be like sexist, but as a female, there's only so many sports you can play, right? Softball, soccer. This is why women's soccer is so dominant. Yeah. Because those are the two. I mean, basketball. You know what I mean? WNBA. I'd put the USA team. I'd put USA women's teams up against anybody in the entire world, and I know that they would flat out dominate because they pour their heart and soul into these teams and their seasons, and they say, "This is what I want to be when I grow up." And I think it's if you're eliminating the Olympics, a lot of women grew up playing softball to make it to the Olympic team. Like, that was their goal. That was their professional sport. And you take it away, and I can't. Well,
here's my problem with it is you had a similar dominance, like with the Dream Team, 1980, 84, 88 men's basketball, right, where they just stomped. I mean, you had Magic Johnson, Larry Bird. They just stomped people. But you watch the Olympics now.
It's close.
I mean, so what occurred is other countries built in programs to develop talent, and that's how you get Nikola Jokic, who's back-to-back MVP, Doncic at Dallas, Manu Ginobili, right? And so the rest of the world will create feeder programs to get players to that level where the U.S., I think in the last 4 Olympics, they didn't win 2 of them.
Mm-mm.
Other countries did.
Yeah.
And so what I'm saying is I think they dropped softball instead of what would naturally happen is the rest of the world would catch up to these girls.
Exactly. And I think, and that's what you're starting to see in soccer too. I mean, USA women's soccer team is still dominant.
Yeah.
But like they're not winning games that they used to be winning by like 7.
Oh, the teams
like,
Sweden,
it's like
Australia.
It's like 3-1 now. Okay, it's still beating, but it's not as like you're kind of on the edge of your seat. Like, hey, it's 2-1. We need a goal.
And the
women
women,
need a goal right now.
The women didn't win the last Olympics, and they didn't win the last World Cup. Teams like Sweden, Australia, Canada are getting much better.
Yeah.
I just hate that you say we're taking away this opportunity from everybody because it's not competitive. It's like, come on.
Yeah.
Anyways, that was a whole nother wormhole we digressed into there. But Jenny Finch, fantastic collegiate career.
Phenomenal athlete. This one is a tradition. Penn State's whiteout. A lot of people have copied it, imitated it. The stadium is actually called the White House. You know what I mean? Like it's another nickname for the Penn State's like stadium. It's again 2004. The point was to just get the student section, but when the coach came on and said, "Hey, we want to get everybody to wear whiteout," and I think that's amazing. Like if you're a coach, I don't understand why every game you wouldn't call for a color call. Like if I am Kirby Smart, I'm saying, "Hey, give us a red out, give us a blackout, give us, you know what I mean? Like a whiteout. Like you have the power, man. Like and fans will show up in that. It's insane. Like Nebraska obviously does it all the time with the sea red, but like at the same time, like the whiteout is 107,000 fans just in white with pom-poms shaking. Nothing's more intimidating than hearing that.
And they usually reserve it for kind of a late season night game.
Yeah.
Night game, whiteout.
Usually against
Ohio State or Michigan, right?
Yeah, and I get it. It's, okay, you're not going to do it every single time and to keep it special. But at the same time, like abuse it, man. Like you should. I would. I'd be like, hey guys, this is a whiteout game. You know what I mean? It's noon. I don't care. We're white. It's hot.
For sure. Okay, let me jump back to football then. And a gentleman who's right over here, over your left shoulder, Mr. Vincent Young, had one of the, first of all,
the greatest national championship game ever.
I think that it is. Now the Alabama-Georgia game from a couple of years ago might rival it. There, you had that the Deshaun Watson Clemson Alabama game. That one might rival it, where Deshaun Watson throws the touchdown pass to Hunter Renfrow at the last minute, wins the game. But for me, and maybe it's because I was younger and it's a nostalgic thing, but that Texas over USC game.
So good.
I mean, you had
USC was loaded.
Like, I mean, you got Reggie Bush,
the receiver,
Mike Williams. I mean,
like they were loaded.
And so USC coming off of winning the national title the previous year, Texas and USC were 1-2 the entire year. The entire year, both teams went undefeated. They were stomping people, except for one game for USC, commonly remembered as the Bush push, when they beat Notre Dame and Matt Weiner pushes Reggie Bush's butt into the end zone, which was against the rules at that time, but they did not call it.
No.
And but anyways, Vince Young, let's see here. We've got 3,036 yards, 26 touchdowns passing. Now that's just passing. Rushing, 1,050 yards, 12 touchdowns. He finished second in the Heisman voting to Reggie Bush.
Yeah, he was right after Reggie Bush. And that's what I'm saying. Like, Reggie Bush was the best college player that year, but it was really close. Like, Vince Young could have easily won the Heisman.
Yeah.
And probably should have, but but at the same time, Reggie Bush was a returner, a punt returner. He played safety a couple times. Like, he was doing it all.
I think Bush should have won it the year before.
When Matt Leinart won it,
Matt Leinart, I don't know. I think Reggie Bush should have won it the year before, and then Vince Young should have won it that
Vince
year.
Young's performance, it was almost like he wasn't playing defense, but he single-handedly won that game for Texas. Like, they were down. Weren't they down like 24-0 an hour, 24-13 or something?
They were down double digits for sure. And I mean, even in like the third quarter.
It was like, this game's over. USC is the greatest football program of all time. Like, because they were rolling teams for 2.5 years. Pete Carroll took over, and it was like everything was in the rearview mirror at that point.
Well, and they were paying players, of course.
Oh yeah, I mean, Reggie Bush has got a free house. Yeah, okay, cool.
And they stole. I'll never forget, and I'll never let this go. They stole the tremendous talent Lendale White out of Denver, away from Colorado.
They're gonna go to CU.
Oh my God! You know,
well, you guys had that 5-star recruit that came out, the running back at the time, though. He came in.
Marcus Houston, maybe.
I don't remember his name.
No, that would have been later.
It was during Hawkins, not before Hawkins.
Yeah. Well, but what people don't realize, and I'm fairly certain that this is correct. Solid. I'm fairly certain that this is correct. So fact check us and give me a comment here. Send us a comment if I'm wrong on this. But I'm fairly certain that Lendale White is actually Chauncey Billups' cousin.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. I know that Lendale White still actually had the record for most touchdowns. Everybody thinks it was Reggie Bush. No, it was Lendale White.
Yeah.
It was
they were lightning and thunder. Yeah.
It was the original. Yeah, it was basically like Thor's hammer.
But one of the saddest things, in my opinion, is the flame out and the failure of Vince Young in the NFL.
Yeah.
I think people remember. People remember now Cam Newton and how transcendent he was in college. Yeah. I think Vince Young was every bit as good as Cam Newton, and he had some mental health stuff. He had some, I don't know, but anyways, a tremendously incredible college career for Vince Young.
Absolutely. I'm going to stick with traditions here, and we're going to go with Rocky Top. So Tennessee's song, I can't stand it because they always score and they sing it. It's the Rocky Top, so it's actually not the official Tennessee song. But everybody sings, So Felice Bryant wrote Rocky Top in 1967. University of Tennessee they got the rights to the song in 1970, and they've been singing it literally from Rocky Top ever since.
You know what I think is really cool about the Tennessee games is that they come running out into that T, the block T that they do at the band. I don't know. I think that's kind of cool.
Or it's the tunnel, like to piggyback off that, a tradition about the Sea of Red tunnel. So Nebraska comes out of that tunnel, and it's just red.
Showmanship, yeah. It's really and by the way, you ask players who play there, and it might be hard to think about now with how long Nebraska's been bad, but it's intimidating to be there. They had a streak of like 25 years in a row. Every game was sold out. And they get loud, like you're saying, Sea of Red.
Oh, yeah. They go nuts. Because it's almost like there's one school that, like, calls them out. And they, like, answer, like, through the tunnel. Like, they have, like, I forget the college. But, like, they'll be like, they'll do a chant. And then you'll hear from the tunnel the chant back. And then they roll out. And you're just like, that's the coolest thing ever. Like, it's giving me goosebumps talking about it.
How about keeping with the Sea of Red conversation? A player that I thought maybe should have won a Heisman at some point. Nebraska's Ndamukong Suh.
One of the dirtiest players of all time.
No, in the pros, possibly. Yeah. But he at defensive tackle was a complete game record. 85 tackles, 12 sacks, and an interception on his way to winning the 2009 Chuck Bednarik Award and the Bronco Nagurski Award. He finished 4th in the Heisman voting. And, man, I think he was another opportunity for a defensive player to win the Heisman Trophy.
Oh, yeah. He's phenomenal. Another tradition that I'm going to go with is the haka. Hawaii does it before every game. I think it's actually pretty intimidating if you've ever seen it. It's a bunch of dudes sticking your tongue out as a form of intimidation. Mm-hmm. It's not like, anything bad, but it's them saying we're going to kill you, basically.
Yeah.
Like, it's a dance that Shaka Zulu came up with. Back in the ancient days, Hawaiian warriors would do it. New Zealand warriors would do it before battle, and they would get hyped up, like they were together, and they slap each other, and their chant is Jehu, like they're like Jehu, and you're just like and like it's actually really cool.
Well, it's like it's warriors.
They're going to war.
Yeah.
Like they're getting hyped up to go to war, and I think it's one of the coolest like pre-dance rituals of all time.
Oh yeah, no question about it. How about going back to women's athletics, how about the absolutely most dominant women's basketball player of all time in college basketball, that being Brittany Griner, the intimidating force for the Baylor Bears, 3-time All-American, 2-time Naismith Player of the Year. She had 2 national championships at Baylor. Mm-hmm. I mean, just an immovable object.
Oh, yeah.
And a really kind of pretty finesse scorer.
But yeah, she could dunk, and she was the first woman that you were like, you know what I mean? Like, you saw her on TV, and you're like, this woman is a force. Like,
well, it didn't happen.
You thought at times she could probably play with the NBA. Like, there were some people that thought that. You know what I mean? Like, I did. I was one of them. I was like, she might be able to hold her own. Like, she might get like 8 points, which is a lot. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But she was basically the Shaquille O'Neal of women's basketball. Like, you couldn't stop her.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, some women, Cheryl Swoops, Candace Parker, had dunked it before, but it was basically kind of like pushing the ball in.
Yeah, no,
she
would
actually got up.
Like
I think she might have been the first one to do a two-handed dunk.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Sticking with basketball, Anthony Davis was one of the greatest centers since, because center had kind of died off before he came, right? Like, you didn't really think of centers as like these elite level athletic players. Anthony Davis, the unibrow, brought it, national champion, like
one and done. I feel like people sometimes we miss the magic because it's like, well, they only played one season. Their stats aren't stacked up career-wise.
Yeah.
But in that one season,
they only played one season to go to the NBA.
Yeah.
Like, because it's required. That's why.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I think it needs to be 2 years. Personally, I think they should extend it 2 years, just because there's such a flood of NBA talent right now that they need to like kind of limit and water it down a little bit, because of all these super teams, stuff like that. I feel like if they kept it, they said college, you guys have to go a minimum of 2 years. Even though they're ready right now, we know you're ready. You have to play college for 2 years. I think it would spice up college basketball a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I think I disagree with that. I mean, well, here's the thing. Now with NIL, a player like Anthony Davis, well, they're going to make more money in NIL than if they go to the G League. That's the problem. It's not, some of the guys you mentioned, LeBron or whatever, who miss college entirely. I mean, that is what it is.
Yeah.
They're going pro. They're good enough.
Those are unicorns. Like, those are once in a generational talents. Like Kobe Bryant, honorable mentions, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James. Had they been in college, they would have owned college.
Yeah, Tracy McGrady.
Even I just mentioned T-Wolves guy.
Kevin Garnett. Yeah,
would have owned it.
Yeah, but here's what I'm saying though: is the problem is not those guys. The problem is your best player on a team who maybe isn't one of the 12 best players in the country.
Yeah.
Say they're 13 to 40 or something. What they're doing now is they're leaving after 1 year, and they're not playing in the NBA. They're playing in the G League.
Yeah.
Because they can make some money in the G League. Well, now with NIL, you're going to make more money if you stay in college.
That's why I'm really curious to see the players like Christian Braun. You know what I mean? From Kansas, like who said that he'll probably be a first-round pick, but it depends where he goes.
I don't know if he's
decided if he's going to come back. And I was like, if I'm you, dude, like,
come back. Yeah.
I would go back. Like, I just think, but still, you're right. Like, that's why we're so mad. We're not mad at NIL. We're mad at the NCAA for mishandling it and not giving it what it needs, and giving you need a commissioner. You flat out need a commissioner at the NCAA. But moving on to traditions, Howard's Rock. So Clemson's Rock, and it's this. For those of you that don't know, it's literally just a rock on a pedestal, and it's down this hill, and the players come out, and they come out elbow to elbow, and they'll touch the rock before they hit the field. And Dabo Sweeney does like a big, basically like sounds the horn, gets the fans hyped, slams the rock, and then sprints down, and then the rest of the players, touch the rock as they come down. It was actually, the story behind the rock was Samuel C. Jones picked up the rock while traveling through Death Valley in the 1960s. He gave it to head coach Frank Howard. The rock was eventually set up in the East End Zone of Memorial Stadium, where it remains today. Howard, who coached Clemson for 30 years, if you're going to give me 110%, you can rub that rock. If you're not, keep your filthy hands off it. The Tiger ride buses, and this is another tradition that the Clemson Tigers do. They get on the buses, and they roll the bus around the stadium. And I think they do it like twice or 2 or 3 times, and the fans they call them in. Basically, this is another one where the fans get involved, and that's really cool. And they shake the bus, and the bus looks like it's about to flip over, like no joke. And then every player touches the rock and sprints in, and it's basically like 30 seconds of the most exciting hype turn up you can get.
Yeah.
For in college football.
What I find interesting though is you have Howard's Rock. And it's Coach Frank Howard. Clemson has now had 2 coaches who have won a national title for them. Neither of them were named Frank Howard. So I mean, you mentioned he was coaching there for 30 years, but he didn't win a national title.
No, he whatever.
But it's a long-standing tradition. I mean, 50, 60 years at this point. How about a player that can't be forgotten, and that is Ron Dane, the Dane Train.
Oh, man.
Still to this day.
Tyson winner.
So he played from 1996 to 99. Still to this day. Okay, now this is what, almost 25 years or whatever, almost 30 years standing now. He still to this day has the NCAA record for career rushing yards, 7,125 yards. He won that 1999 Heisman Trophy you're talking about. And that year he rushed for 3,722 yards.
I saw one of the ESPN will show like an old bowl game, and like obviously the premise is like one or two players are really good. Ron Day was on there, and it was the last regular season game. They gave him the ball 20 times in a row.
Yeah.
They didn't throw the ball for 20 straight plays.
Yeah.
It was just him.
And defenses would load the box.
He was a man among boys. Like he could not be stopped.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. And he became a Bronco later on in his career, which was really cool. You get a chance to see him, but like, when you peak that early, you're not going to get to the next level potentially. Like you peak. This is as good as
he had a little more than a cup of coffee in the NFL. Yeah. I mean, I think he did better in the NFL than like Vince Young.
Oh yeah,
but not much. He wasn't a bust, but
he had the most. But the rumor is like he's got like 9 baby mamas. So yeah.
God bless him.
Good for him. Good for him.
Oh my gosh.
I would like to do the next. I want to talk about Larry Fitzgerald. I think the Pittsburgh wide receiver was, and I'm kind of going to probably go on a string of wide receivers here in the next couple guys. But Larry Fitzgerald was phenomenal. I thought he probably should have won the Heisman, or he was in contention for the Heisman. I don't remember who won it that year.
Jason White, quarterback from Oklahoma.
Okay,
underwhelming. Yeah, Larry Fitzgerald should have won.
Larry Fitzgerald should have won it. Came in the NFL and took it by storm. Like changed the receiver position. People, I remember the most iconic catch he had as an Arizona Cardinal in the Super Bowl. He was crying after he scored the touchdown because it was like curl. He just broke
right down the middle.
Right down the middle. And it was wide open. Yeah. Like you're just like, all right, like how good are you? And it was you thought that was the touchdown. That was the touchdown that should have won the Super Bowl, but it unfortunately didn't happen.
And people forget at quarterback for the Cardinals, Kurt Warner,
the old grocery kid.
Yeah,
man,
he's got a new movie
on him as well, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, Larry Fitz giving some love.
Third most receiving touchdowns at the time in NCAA history, Larry Fitzgerald.
Phenomenal player.
And he's, from everyone I've heard from, he's a phenomenal guy. A good guy in the community. Yeah.
People can't stop talking about him, honestly, which is really cool. Who do you got?
I mean, Ty Detmer, quarterback at BYU.
Okay.
BYU has actually a kind of a storied history of great quarterbacks. You had quarterback for the Browns, Jim McMahon. A lot of people don't know Steve Young was quarterback at BYU.
Was.
And the third quarterback in that trilogy, in that sequence, was Ty Detmer, who won the Heisman Trophy in 1990. In 3 seasons, he became the NCAA all-time passing yards leader at the time.
Wow.
15,031 yards. He's still, to this day, number 5 all-time.
That's amazing. I'm going to do one more player, and it's because I just don't think you can top him. Calvin Johnson from Georgia Tech. He came from, and you could, Demarius Thomas also came from this tree as well. But Georgia Tech, at the time, ran a triple option offense. The fact that Calvin Johnson was a top 10 overall pick, he only did one thing at the combine. He ran a 40, and that was it. He said, "I'm only going to run the 40." Everybody else knows what they need to see. He still has like a bunch of records for Georgia Tech, I think, but they never threw the ball. But the fact that you had a receiver go in the first round, a triple option offense, says all you need to say. Had a phenomenal career in Detroit. Honestly, him and Matt Stafford, the fact that they weren't able to win more than probably 2 playoff games, I think, in their tenure, it just goes to show you how much of a dumpster fire Detroit Lions are.
Well, Barry Sanders couldn't get it done there.
No, but that's what I'm saying. They don't draft outside of – they have amazing players, but they just don't draft anybody else. And you're like, what are you doing?
Yeah, when you think about it, Barry Sanders, definitely the greatest running back in college football history.
Oklahoma State, yeah.
Oklahoma State. And then Calvin Johnson, one of the best wide receivers. At the same organization can't get it done. Like Detroit, I feel bad for Detroit fans because your organization is just awful.
It needs to sell the team. But last one.
Okay, how about let's go with a more recent one. And he just proved that he's ready to be a pro this year, taking the Cincinnati Bengals all the way to the Super Bowl. Joe Burrow, in one season, again, another situation. You have one season, he throws for 5,671 yards and 60 touchdowns for LSU. Probably the greatest single season we've ever seen a quarterback have. That team was maybe one of the best college football teams ever.
For 1 year, Edo got what he wanted. got fired the next year, unfortunately. But he
Yeah.
caught lightning in a bottle with
He
Joe
did.
Burrow.
No question.
And I wasn't a believer. I was like, if you have a kid that can't do this can't show signs of being good for 2-3 years, he bounced around a little bit. Once it started at Ohio State,
He was a backup. Yeah. He was a backup to Dwayne Haskins.
Can you imagine that?
Okay, and then to Justin Fields more recently. But in that year, 2019, I believe it was, Burrow hit the trifecta. He won the Heisman, won the national championship, number one overall.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. Can't speak enough. Like I said, I wasn't a believer of Joe Burrow. I thought he was just. I was like, okay, and I'm in the mindset where if you're already here, you're not going to get much better. Mm-hmm. He took another leap.
That midseason game.
That he got hurt his rookie.
Yeah, that midseason game. If you remember when they played at Alabama.
Oh.
And it was on it was like maybe a 3 o'clock game.
Was expecting that.
And I remember watching it with my wife, and my wife was like, LSU's going to win this. And I was like, you never bet against Alabama.
I'm in the same mindset, too.
And,
until you see them lose, you're like, oh, I'm shocked.
And they beat them, and it was like, okay, this is now the team to beat.
Mm-hmm. LSU took the world by storm, literally. But this has been a lot of fun. Thank you guys so much for joining us. It was traditions. There's a million other traditions we didn't list, a million other players we didn't list. That's okay, because you can do the homework on your own. You know what I mean? Hit us back with comments. I'm sure throughout the
who did we forget? Who do you want us to talk about?
Oh, man. Yeah, let us know, because we can go in depth on the players, too. If you want to see a list of, top running backs, top receivers, quarterbacks, top shortstops, third baseman, it doesn't matter. College sports is forever, always instilled in our blood, your blood. But this has been Right on Cue. This has been a Fan Section Podcast. Thank you guys so much. My name is Alan. That is Tyson, and we are out.